This country is a treasure trove of incredible buildings, amazing objects and of course extraordinary people who have all helped make up our rich history. On Britain's Hidden Heritage, we've travelled the United Kingdom, visiting much loved treasures, unearthing gems from the past as we go. Today I will be visiting one of the country's most beautiful grand buildings, the house that Queen Victoria called home. When you're in this room, there's a real sense of history. Claire Balding will be trawling through some of the 22,000 incredible items that were assembled by one of Britain's first extreme hoarders.
Wow, there's uniforms up there. Now they look like Civil War.
Absolutely. They're just amazing how well preserved they are.
Charlie Luxton finds out that not all of our beautiful buildings have stood the test of time.
I'll be in Scotland looking at a tale of two castles. They started life as equals, but their histories have been very, very different.
This is the story of Britain's hidden heritage. When Queen Victoria married Prince Albert in 1840, they had the choice of 3 royal palaces to live in: Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace and the Royal Pavilion at Brighton. However, for this family-minded young couple, these 3 grand architectural delights were a little too much for them. What they really wanted, and to put it in the Queen's own words, were a place of one's own, quiet and retired. And so, using their own money, they came to the Isle of Wight and began to build for themselves their very own modern family home. Welcome to Osborne. Queen Victoria knew and loved the Isle of Wight after holidaying on the island as a child, and she and Prince Albert were both determined to buy a property here. The island had everything they were looking for: beautiful countryside, the sea air, and above all, it was quiet. With the coming of the railways, it was now quick and easy to get here from London, and yet it still had the remoteness and the privacy that the Queen so sought after. The Isle of Wight was, in short, the perfect antidote to court life and official duties, and Victoria and Albert could not wait to move in. Walk inside Osborne and you're instantly transported back to the 19th century and Queen Victoria's home very much as she would have known it, apart perhaps from an absence of servants, although it's certainly not short of staff. English Heritage have been managing the house since 1986, and it's a popular attraction with visitors drawn by the opulent interiors and by the opportunity to see firsthand how one of Britain's most celebrated monarchs went about her family life. Now, while the staff get ready to open up the house to the general public, I've got the opportunity to have a tour all to myself. Now, this is the door that the guests and officials would arrive at to enter the building. Once inside, you were greeted by what I can only describe as a sculpture court, a place to show off your latest acquisition of fine art. And the first thing you notice is a statue, a young Queen Victoria in classical costume by John Gibson. Prince Albert was very scholarly, keen to impress with his selection of classically inspired statues. Victoria, however, was quite the opposite. Her choices of artwork leant towards the sentimental. And here is a very good example of one such statue. This was her favourite pet dog. It was a collie, and he went by the name of Noble. And I think that is the most marvellous name for a royal dog, Noble. In fact, the whole house is full of clues that tell us about the relationship of the royal couple and their family life. Because what makes Osborne unique among royal residences is that it was not lived in before Victoria and Albert, and it was not lived in after. And that becomes evident as you walk around. Well, here we are in Victoria and Albert's drawing room, and it is a magnificent, grand room. This may be a family home, but this is a subtle reminder that it's the home of heads of state. And Queen Victoria herself described this room as extremely handsome, with its yellow damask satin curtains and furniture to match. We're surrounded by statues of the children, etchings done by family members, and photographs and portraits. It is unique, unlike any other royal collection, because what you see here has been collected in Victoria and Albert's lifetime by them. Nothing has been handed down from previous generations, and nothing has been added to after their death. And that's why everything here sits in perfect harmony. It was their choice. Now, one thing that really does arrest my attention are these magnificent chandeliers. There's 3 hanging from the ceiling up here. They're made by Oslers of Birmingham. And there's 2, a matching pair of pedestal chandeliers here. First exhibited at the Great Exhibition in London in 1851, an idea conceived by Albert himself to promote artisans and craftsmanship in this country. And he actually oversaw the design of these ones, and with that royal seal of approval, Oslers went on to dominate the high-end manufacturing market. Perhaps to contemporary eyes, the interiors of Osborne look quite fussy, but take yourself back to the mid-19th century, and this house would have had an incredibly modern feel. Victoria and Albert, like any other young, well-to-do family, wanted to stamp their own sense of style on their family home. From the outside, Osborne towered over an estate of 342 acres. At the time, it was quite a radical design, and that was totally down to Prince Albert himself, with the aid of London builder Thomas Cubitt, who was employed to bring the Prince's vision to life. Looking at the house here now, you feel like you've been transported to the continent. It's got a very Italianate feel to it.
Yes, it has. Prince Albert was very well travelled. He'd done the Grand Tour, he'd visited Italy, and when he came here to Osborne, it's said that the view across the Solent from here looked like the Bay of Naples, and so he really wanted an Italian style.
He worked closely with the builder Thomas Cubitt. Was it on a day-to-day basis? Did this thing evolve, or were there sets of drawings and plans for this put in place by Albert?
I think they had a very close working relationship. They talked a lot directly one with the other. Albert certainly came up with a very clear brief, and Thomas Cubitt was able to build to that brief
and understand
on
that.
time and to budget.
That must have impressed his wife, surely.
Yes, I expect it probably did. I think he was probably quite keen to do that because, you know, as consort and not king, he didn't really have any official role. He famously said in the early years of the marriage that he was only the husband and not the master of the house. So I suppose, yes, he was looking for a project that he could really sort of, you know, spread his wings.
And it's a great place to bring up a family as well.
Paradise. Prince Albert out there with the kids, flying kites, catching butterflies, learning to swim on the beach. It must have been absolute heaven.
Life at Osborne wasn't just all about Victoria and Albert and a world above stairs. There was a huge team of staff here working exceptionally hard below stairs, keeping this house running to an exactingly high standard. And later on in the programme, we'll be finding out a little bit more about them. But first, Claire Balding has made a trip to the Cotswolds to discover the bizarre collection of an extraordinary man.
Britain's heritage isn't just about artefacts and architecture, it's also peopled with great individuals, men and women who have changed the world we live in or whose great creations have had an impact on our culture. Now, the man I've come to find out more about today operated on a somewhat smaller scale. His legacy didn't really extend beyond the limits of this Gloucestershire village, but step inside his house and you enter one of Britain's most extraordinary heritage treasures.
This is Snowshill Manor, and after the First World War, its celebrated owner was Charles Paget Wade. He wasn't an inventor, a politician, a scientist or a writer. No, Charles Wade was one of history's true eccentrics. You could say he was Britain's first extreme hoarder. But over his lifetime, he didn't just collect the detritus of daily life. He collected beautifully crafted objects whose origins not only spanned the world, but spanned all of history. The remarkable collection had been growing since Wade was just 7 years old, a time when his parents were mostly abroad, leaving their son to a rather isolated upbringing in the care of his grandmother.
So this is Granny Spencer, who Charles Wade was sent to live with as a small boy in
She's quite
Oxford.
severe looking, isn't she?
She is quite severe looking, and this was her cabinet. It's a beautiful Cantonese cabinet. It's showing a bit of wear now, a bit of age. But on a Sunday, Charles Wade as a boy was allowed to look inside here, and he thought it was wonderful. It was like a golden palace. It had all these wonderful objects inside it, and that really inspired his collecting. So he bought his first objects at the age of 7 and then just collected for the rest of his life.
Luckily for Wade, he inherited a fortune before he was 30. His father had been a wealthy sugar merchant, which gave Charles the means to buy and restore this old Cotswold Manor house. This was to become the home of his collection, and for the rest of his life his Latin motto applied to everything he did: Nequid pereat, let nothing perish.
So is there any method to this, or is it just a collection of things?
Oh, there's definitely a method. It's all about colour, design and craftsmanship. So all of the objects that are collected are handmade, handcrafted, lovingly made, and that's really what inspired Charles Wade to collect.
Now there seems to be a very strong Japanese influence in a few things around the house, and this is a good example.
That's right, this is a 19th century carving of a mask maker, and it was made by a man called Hananuma, and he's carved out of a solid piece of wood, and this was Charles Wade's favourite object.
What's the hair?
It's actually human hair individually inserted. You can see the veins that protrude, you can see muscle definition. It's an astonishing piece of work.
And also the tiny mask that he's holding, that is so delicate. Charles Wade had the largest private collection of samurai warriors outside Japan. He had 28 of them in total, and the first one he got was by accident. He went into Cheltenham to get a washer for a tap, stopped at a hardware shop. The guy who ran the shop had one of these suits of armour by the counter, so obviously Charles Wade asked about it. He said, "Oh yeah, I've got a load more in the garden, my wife won't let me have them in the house." So he went there, bought 6 of them, and then added to the collection. They're so realistic, it's terrifying. Just so much stuff. Wow, there's uniforms up there. Now they look like Civil War.
Absolutely, they're Cromwellian armour, and they're just amazing how well preserved they are.
Did he ever dress up in them himself?
Oh yes.
Did he?
Great sense of theatre about the house and about Charles Wade.
It would be easy to discount Wade as a slightly ridiculous figure. Eccentric, certainly. But recently, an incredible new discovery has come to light. A set of Wade's personal sketchbooks were discovered in a damp cellar. Hidden for over 100 years, these worm-eaten relics go to show what an immensely talented artist and draftsman he really was. And I'm lucky enough to be one of the first to see them.
And these were done around 1905 when he was working as an architect. He worked on Hampstead Garden suburb, so he worked with the firm of Parker and Unwin for a few years. But when obviously his father died, he inherited sugar plantations. That gave him the money to pretty much retire at a very early age and just indulge his passions.
But for a man with few financial concerns, Wade chose to live a very simple life. Whilst he housed his collection in the main Snowshill Manor, his living accommodation was here, a tiny cottage next door. This was a place free from all mod cons. There's not even a kitchen. Wade survived on the most basic of diets: boiled eggs, and guava jam sandwiches. The hub of his world was his workshop, where he turned his hand to any craft or repair work that his collection demanded. On his death in 1956, Wade left Snowshill to the nation, a temple to his work and a quite extraordinary life.
That is the most extraordinary place, and there's no doubt that the more time you spend in there, the more it rewards you, because there are so many fascinating objects and there are little hidden treasures behind panels. It's just intriguing. And it may be that Charles Wade didn't build anything of great significance, but that is a life's work of art, and without people like him, the world would be an infinitely duller place.
Later on Britain's Hidden Heritage, Charlie Luxton will be unearthing a long-forgotten ruin.
It's almost like it's just gone into a very long sleep.
But first, we're back on the Isle of Wight and Osborne, where my tour continues. The house today is in pristine condition, much as it would have been 150 years ago. Victoria and Albert were famously particular about the standard the house was kept in. But it wasn't all about regimental order. Now cast your mind back to the late 1800s. What would day-to-day life have been like for Queen Victoria? Well, as Queen, a good section of the day would be dedicated to official duties, meeting ministers and listening to royal advisors. But what about family life? Well, it seems both Albert and Victoria were delighted to spend as much time with their children as possible. But there's one thing that the family all enjoyed together, and that was the Magic Lantern Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. The fun will now commence. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you now to Bonzo the Wonder Dog. Here he is. Now, Bonzo is about to perform a remarkable trick. Bonzo will now leap into the air straight through the hoop at the word of command. Hello, 1, 2, 3, hoopla! Hey, thank you.
Magic lanterns were hugely popular in Victorian Britain. Touring lanternists like Charles Goodwin Norton were regular entertainers for the royal family, and the Queen herself spoke fondly of them.
Here's another character.
The little mouse is going to go in his mouth.
Oh, you guessed. Oh, here's another one.
Oh, I didn't know he was going to eat it, though.
Yeah. Of course.
You can see this would appeal to the whole family, couldn't you?
Yes.
This must have been, in its day, though, like early television. Probably quite scary with moving pictures for the very first time.
Yeah, I think so. And actually, the magic lantern goes back to the middle of the 17th century, believe it or not. The first mention in this country is in Pepys' diary about 1666. He went to see a magic lantern demonstration.
What we're looking at now, the projector you've got here, is this the sort of kit that was available at Victoria's time?
Yes, it was. It's called a biunial lantern because it has two lenses. Mm-hmm. So you could do things like transformations, superimpositions, all kinds of wonderful effects.
And all these were available to buy at the time, weren't they?
Yes, to buy, and by the 1890s you could hire them as well. So if you had a magic lantern at home, you could go to a shop in the high street and you could hire your slides for a night.
Do you know the sort of slides that would amuse Victoria?
There are references to shows given here at Osborne House, in fact, to Victoria. And we know she liked a particular story set called The Two Magicians, or Mystify and Company. It tells of these two rival magicians who happened to be partners in the same company. I say they were rivals, so they were constantly trying to come up with ways of getting the edge over their partners. The sort of thing that Queen Victoria probably would have enjoyed too are these sequences known as dissolvent view sequences. Here's a typical one. This is a watermill, for example. You could turn winter into spring as the snow melts.
Oh, look at that.
And you can actually hear the mill wheel turning.
You can. It's very clever. Because it's something today that we don't see very often, a magic lantern show, we're constantly looking at wonderful antiques and fine art of the period. But this really does evoke more, doesn't it? This really says it all.
Well, it's a time capsule in many ways, a visual time capsule, because you can not only see the history of the Victorian period through the magic lantern, but see it as the Victorians themselves would have seen it.
And seeing it being operated and the whole performance that you're putting on as well. Life for Queen Victoria and her family was without doubt one of privilege. What the Queen wanted in her day-to-day life, she would get. Which meant having a large team of behind-the-scenes professionals ready to jump. Now, I've come down below stairs to the servants' quarters. This would have been a hive of activity in its day. Everybody working hard. The laundry would have been down here, the kitchens. You can imagine, especially at meal times, pots and pans clattering, footsteps going to and fro. The Queen would not come down here. But there's one room in this basement area that you would get a great deal of peace and quiet. Bizarrely enough, it is the lift operator's room. And you have to remember, it would have been dark down here as well. So the lift operator had to operate the lift manually by pulling this rope. The Queen would instruct the page to say she was getting in the lift and she was about to ring the bell. He would come charging down the stairs and tell the lift operator, who would have been one of the footmen, to get ready, the bell's going to ring, she's in the lift. And there you have it, ding, 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 one ring maybe for up, 2 rings for down, depending on which direction she was going. It's not exactly state of the art. Let's face it, she was the Queen of England, but it did work. The Queen and her family would often spend over 100 days a year at Osborne, and when in residence would bring a lot of extra staff. Ladies in waiting, footmen, advisors and guests. Downstairs, particularly at mealtimes, the place had to run like a well-oiled machine. How many staff were employed here at the house, Rowena?
It did change, but it was between about 80 or could go up to as much as 120.
So what would have taken place in this room? It looks rather an unusual room.
Well, this is for the table deckers. Their job is specifically to make sure that upstairs in the dining room, everything is perfect. Not just how the knives and forks are laid. They'd have a ruler to do that. They would be absolutely precise. But it's the timing of these complex meals. I mean, you've got to have up to 8 courses at a banquet, and everything has to come out hot, which at Osborne is quite a feat because the kitchens are almost half a mile away, as it were, in the other direction, because Queen Victoria didn't like the smell of cooking anywhere near her or anywhere near in the house. So they have a little hot trolley that they have to trundle along. I mean, it's almost like Heathrow here with food landing and going.
So it was non-stop?
Yes.
Now, what's this room? There's a rather large table there.
Well, this is the hub of the table deckers room, if you like, where most of the activity went on.
So this is where you plate up?
Yes.
Right,
You've got your plates here and straight to the table.
That's it, plate up and up those stairs?
Yes.
It is a lovely dinner service. Is it complete?
Actually, it's not the original dinner service.
Isn't it, really?
No. After Queen Victoria died, it's tradition, really, in the royal family that the sort of standard dinner services, as you can see, it's got the Queen's cipher here, because they're not likely to be used again. The perk, as it were, for the servants is that they take pieces of it. But it means that when we came to try and reproduce what the Queen had, there was nothing left. We didn't know what there was here.
Presumably a lot of the staff lived here on the island, so maybe a lot of it is still here?
Oh, I do hope so. I hope one day someone will turn up and say, this is a plate we've got in the attic, or my grandmother had, is this from Osborne? And then we would have something that we knew was from here.
From Queen Victoria's beautiful dinner service to the immaculately kept fixtures and fittings, English Heritage have done an incredible job bringing Osborne back to the condition it would have been in 150 years ago. Not all our historic houses have fared so well as this one. Our reporter Charlie Luxton has made a trip to Scotland to find out what happens when fate is not so kind to a country house.
Welcome to the blustery Ayrshire coastline and the rather wonderful Culzean Castle. It's one of the best known country estates in Scotland, one of its top heritage attractions. And it's even here on the Royal Bank of Scotland £5 note. The castle was the creation of Robert Adam, arguably Scotland's most celebrated architect. In the 1780s, he had an almost free rein to design and build Culzean as he saw fit. From the outside, it's a dramatic castle with square turrets, endless crenellations, and a drum tower overlooking the sea. Inside, it's a fine country mansion with Adam's plasterwork and personally designed features. It's been in the care of the National Trust for Scotland since 1945, and they've been conserving, restoring it and publicising it since then. Its future is guaranteed, but Culzean Castle is just the start of our story. Not all of our country houses have fared as well as this one. Since the start of the 20th century, Britain has lost over 1,500 significant properties. They've been abandoned, gutted, and usually demolished. Every corner of Britain was affected, including right here in Ayrshire. Now, I want you to fix a picture of this place in your mind's eye, because Culzean has a sister, another castle, hidden, neglected, and forgotten. It's time for me to head inland in search of a rather mysterious property. The name of the place is Dalwarren Castle, once a jewel in the crown of Scotland's beautiful buildings. Now, if you wind the clock back a couple of centuries, Culzean and Dalwarren have a lot in common. They're owned by the same wealthy family. They're just a few miles apart, both designed by the fair hand of Robert Adam. But since then, they've taken a very different path, and this is it here. And that is quite extraordinary. Look at that. That's amazing. I mean, it looks so perfect. I thought it'd be more sort of fallen down, more like a ruin, but actually the outside looks like it's all still there, but through the windows you can see the interiors have totally disappeared. It's almost like it's kind of gone to sleep. The family who originally commissioned Dalwarren stayed for a century, until financial problems led them to sell their Robert Adam showpiece. The castle's life in the 20th century was anything but settled, until ultimately the main building was left empty. The shell of Dalwarren has remained pretty much untouched since the late 1960s, when the last resident took the decision to remove the roof. You see, the cost of upkeeping the castle had become too much to bear, and by removing the roof they made it uninhabitable, and therefore they were no longer liable to pay rates. The building and its land remain in private ownership, and as you can see, visitors are not normally welcome. Hello, Willie. But Dalwarren's neighbour, who's also one of its recent owners, has agreed to meet me.
Well, my first connection to it was as a neighbouring farmer. Myself and my father at that time bought the castle and the surrounding land, and it was really land I was looking for to expand the farming enterprise at the time.
So you bought, how many acres did you get?
300.
So you bought 300 acres and there just happened to be this massive castle on it, and that was
yes.
by the by. Did you use it for anything?
Nothing at all, really. We used the coach houses and attached buildings across the courtyard. I indeed stayed there for the first 17 years of my married life.
Did your kids play in the sort of in there?
Well, we tried to discourage them, but
I bet you they did, didn't they? I bet you that would be
we did it
brilliant.
from time to time, yes.
Did you do anything to actually sort of preserve the castle itself?
No, nothing whatever. There wasn't a lot you could do with it, actually. The roof was taken off about 5 years previously to us buying the castle.
I'm fascinated by the idea that for at least 50 years now, this architectural treasure has been of no value other than the price of the land on which it stands. The exterior is clearly in the Robert Adam Scottish castle style, but it's often his interiors for which Adam is best remembered, and I can't wait to take a look inside today. Showing me round is historian Michael Davis, who has written extensively on mansions and castles in Ayrshire.
Oh, so the roof is totally gone. You can see, look, trees growing up there, lath and plaster work is still there. Gosh, panelling, the half panelling. Look at that spiral stair going right up. Look, there's the railings up there.
There's only one thing for sure with this place, it's certainly not as Mr. Adam intended it.
Well, this is very like Culzean, isn't it?
Yes, it's like a miniature of the round room at Culzean.
And what do you think this room was?
This was a drawing room. This whole cylinder, it really consisted of a whole series of circular rooms. And on the top floor was in fact the library.
The view up there would have been amazing.
Yes, I can in fact vouch for the fact that it was amazing because I've been up there in the 1980s when I visited Dalhorn, and I was able to stand on the landing and I could look straight across to the windows, and there were still even carved Adam bookcases clinging to the sides of the walls, defying gravity.
We really know very little about the original interiors at Dalwarren. But we can at least imagine interiors here to match those still found at Culzean Castle, including even perhaps Adams's oval staircase, a superbly theatrical centrepiece bathed in light pouring in from above.
Charlie, this is a room you really have to see.
Wow, that is a complete cantilevering 3-level stone stair, complete with tree. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before in my life. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
You can imagine this in rural Ayrshire, appearing in the 1780s, 1790s. This is really not
cutting edge, isn't it?
Yes. The neighbours must have come, and they must have been really jealous.
But I mean, there's obviously something sort of slightly tragic about the loss of this piece of architectural heritage, but also what's left is kind of fascinating in its own way too.
It's absolutely stunning. Yes, it is sad, but there's also an element to this castle which is absolutely spectacular. Fundamentally, the 60s, the 70s, and even into the 80s were really very bad for country house heritage. After the Second World War, society had changed. Wage costs were going up, and country houses were a thing that many people thought we would be best without, almost. It's a very different story here from Culzean, but it's a story I think which is worth telling. It's very much the story of all those houses which actually didn't make it.
So what is the future for Dalwarren Castle? There's been grand talk of it becoming the centre of a golf resort, but we have to accept it may just remain a ruin at the continuing mercy of the Scottish weather. Is that so bad a thing though? There's an architectural majesty about ruins, and they always tell stories of our changing times.
The idea of the perfect country house preserved for all time is really only for the lucky few. For the most part, time cannot be stopped for country houses any more than it can for the rest of us.
Back on the Isle of Wight, my behind-the-scenes look at Osborne continues. One of the most recognisable architectural features of the building are its twin Italian Renaissance-style towers. One built as an observation platform where the view over the grounds and the coastline could be enjoyed. The second tower to incorporate a rather magnificent clock. Definitely not frequented by the royals, as access is through a cupboard door. Well, here we are. This is what I want to see. We're almost around sort of 32 metres up in the air now, but I've come up to see this magnificent clock. Now, here, look. The maker's name, John Smith. made in 1777 for His Majesty King George III. Now, originally this clock was installed at Kew Palace, but it was brought here to Osborne in 1849. It had one dial back at Kew Palace, but Queen Victoria wanted 4 dials, so she had it altered because she wanted to see a dial on each elevation of this tower, so she could tell the time from wherever she was in the grounds. And the dials work, they're synchronised by virtue of this very clever mechanism that runs all around this tower, linking up the dials. Fabulous, and it strikes on every quarter of the hour. The views from the clock tower are quite outstanding, but this seemingly natural beauty was in fact given a helping hand by Prince Albert himself. He and builder Thomas Cubitt didn't just design the beautiful terraces that sit beneath the royal apartments, they completely reshaped the whole landscape in order to give it an idyllic sweeping view down to the sea, an enormous task in the days before mechanical earth movers. In Victorian England, the seaside was becoming increasingly popular. Now accessible with the invention of railways, people for the first time began to flock out of the smoggy cities and escape to the coast. Victoria and Albert were no exception. Although unlike most, they had their own private beach, just half a mile from the house. Currently under restoration by English Heritage, this place gives a unique insight into royal family life. What would everybody be doing? I mean, obviously Victoria would be playing with the princes and the princesses down here. How would they enjoy their day?
Well, we think that the royal children used to come down here very often with their governess, Lady Littleton, rather than with the Queen and Prince Albert themselves. And the Queen would often just sort of drop in to visit. She would go on her sort of rides or walks around the estate, and she would drop in to see how the children were getting on. And we know from sort of Lady Littleton's letters that the children loved collecting shells, digging on the sand.
The usual things.
The usual things that children do, yes.
Yeah.
It was their first experience of the seaside.
Well, there's a bit of restoration going on here with this alcove with all the scaffolding going up.
Well, this is Queen Victoria's alcove by the sea. They started building it around 1865 and it was completed not until 1869, surprisingly enough.
This is actually marvellous, isn't it? I like the mosaic work as well. There's a lot of detail here.
There is.
What would have been the value of this to Victoria?
Well, I think she found this as a lovely, tranquil and peaceful place to shelter while she looked out to sea and sketched or dealt with her correspondence. We know she loved being in the open air. She had a number of her watercolours we have here which show pictures of the area near to the beach. And this one is showing the valley footpath leading down to the beach, and you've got the Queen's children there all busy decorating, adorning their houses with flowers. And then we have another one here.
This is the actual beach here we're on.
This is, yes, sort of view down to the beach there with a little boat just offshore. And then I think we have one down here. This is a more sombre view here for the period after the death of Albert, where she's gone to much more sort of like loose brush strokes and much lighter shades. She was very well trained by people like Edward Lear and William Leach, who was her drawing master, who came down here and gave her lessons in watercolour drawing, and she became a very proficient artist.
She's very good. The last part of my tour concentrates on the final years of both Albert and Victoria. The death of Albert at the age of just 42 had a devastating effect on the Queen. The perfect family life came to an abrupt and untimely end, and this family home became a retreat and a place of mourning. The private sitting room and the bedrooms of the royal couple are perhaps the most moving of all the rooms at Osborne. They were sealed up to all but close family members for 50 years, and since then they've been kept just as they were at the end of the Queen's life. Now this does look more like a family room, slightly more cluttered, lived in, but that's what you'd expect.
Yes, up here in the private apartments, it's like a little flat almost. And yes, lots of clutter.
It's these two writing desks. Obviously, is this one the Queen's?
Queen's on the left, yeah.
Slightly more cluttered.
Yes.
Albert's a little bit more minimal.
Yes, yes.
Now, most people's sort of preconception of Albert and Victoria, slightly prudish, yet there they are sitting together, side by side, looking up at 10 beautiful, naked, semi-naked ladies.
Yeah, I mean, this was a birthday present from Queen Victoria to Prince Albert. I don't know whether she was trying to sort of loosen him up a little bit, perhaps.
Hey, look, there's somebody in the bushes there. Look. I mean, that shows a sense of humour, doesn't it? That really does.
Yes,
Let's talk about the happier times, because obviously this was a family room. And the children would have been allowed to play in here, which was quite unusual, because children of a similar status, let's say, born to other heads of state, would have been far removed from these quarters, wouldn't they?
Oh yes, and similar Victorian houses of this period, there would have been a completely separate nursery wing miles away from the parents' quarters. But no, that wasn't the case at Osborne. The children were very integrated into the daily life of the Queen and the Prince. The nurseries are immediately above us here, for instance. We know from references in the Queen's journals that the children were allowed into this room. And,
so their toys would have been in here, and sometimes in their little seats and chairs.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, that's lovely. It just goes to show what a family-orientated, loving couple they were. It's impossible not to be touched by the haunting atmosphere that still pervades this part of the house. Over the years, many stories have grown up around Albert and Victoria, but enter their private quarters at Osborne, with their belongings sitting virtually untouched for over a century, and you get a true picture of this devoted couple. And Michael, this is Albert's dressing room, but it looks more like a study.
Well, it was a study, really. It was a cross between a study and a dressing room. And it was here that Albert came first thing in the morning to go through his papers and his correspondence and so on.
Was it love at first sight when they first met?
Perhaps not at first sight, but I think it's second sight.
That's pretty good going, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, famously, I think Queen Victoria wrote in her journal after the second time that she met Albert at Windsor that she beheld Albert, who is beautiful.
Let's just talk about his death, 1861. I mean, it was a particularly bad year for the Queen.
1861 wasn't a good year for Queen Victoria. Her mother died in March, and Albert, of course, died on the 14th of December. And just days after Albert's death at Windsor, the Queen retreated straight away down here to Osborne.
Did she suffer from depression?
Yes, I suppose, yes, it's what we would now call, I think, recognised as depression, a sort of some kind of a breakdown, really, bearing in mind that the Queen and the Prince had hardly spent any time apart. You know, it was a very close working relationship as well as a personal relationship. And when that ended, I think the Queen was completely poleaxed and disorientated. I really think she didn't quite know how to go forward.
But you can understand her coming back here, can't you? Just wanting to be surrounded by his things. You know, you can actually gain a lot of strength from that.
I think that the Queen didn't in a way acknowledge Albert's passing. You know, I think she kept everything very much as it was in his time, including indeed in this room, making sure that his clothes were laid out every morning. And we know that also his bowl of water on his washstand was filled up with hot water every morning, as if he was just sort of about to come into the room.
That's very touching. Throughout her widowhood, Victoria spent every Christmas at Osborne. In old age, rheumatism in her legs rendered her lame. Her eyesight was clouded by cataracts. And by the new year of 1901, she was confined to her room, feeling drowsy and confused. Today, that room, perhaps more than anywhere else in the house, tells us much about the married life and the final days of Victoria. This is the Queen's bedroom, the most private and important room in the house. And the first thing you notice is the bed. After Albert's death, Victoria always slept with a portrait of Albert on his side of the bed. And there's a little pouch there on the headboard. Albert always popped his watch in there before he went to sleep. There's something I want to point out, though. It's a little tiny plaque that Victoria had mounted on the footboard. It's a personal memorial, really. And it tells you the date they first slept together and the date they last slept together. But this is not just Queen Victoria's bedroom. This is where Victoria died in January in 1901. It was the end of the Victorian era. The things we associate with Queen Victoria, the Great British Empire, the Industrial Revolution, moving forward at full tilt, steam trains, steamships. It all happened in her reign. When you're in this room, there's a real sense of history. And we always associate Victoria in mourning, dressed in black. But for her funeral, she was dressed in white and purple. Although both Victoria and Albert adored their life here at Osborne, it held few charms for their children. In her will, she left strict instructions that the house should stay within the family. But no one wanted it. Perhaps it was too associated with their mother's death. Or perhaps the world had changed. The house that Victoria and Albert made so personal to themselves was no longer modern in the new era of the 20th century. The new King Edward VII presented it to the nation. It became a naval training school and a convalescent home, eventually opening to the public, much as it is today. Osborne is without doubt one of Britain's most elegant stately homes. The building, the grounds and the setting are simply stunning. But for me, what makes Osborne such a powerful part of our heritage is the intimate story it tells us about Victoria and Albert, their attention to detail and their desire to create for themselves a perfect family home, and of course their love and affection for their children. From above, the British Isles are a patchwork of fields, towns and villages, but hidden amongst them are our heritage secrets, the remains of our industrial and social past, and of course those jewels in the crown, our country houses. Today we're in Northern Ireland at one of our most important historic buildings, a stately home that was lived in by a family who, for 2 centuries, shaped the political landscape of the United Kingdom. The house has now been left to the nation, and I'll be finding out about its past owners and some of the treasures unearthed within. Also, Claire Balding will be in the Midlands, taking a close look at some of the finest stained glass ever made.
I don't quite know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting this.
Charlie Luxton travels to the Lake District, where he'll be celebrating one of the unsung heroes of the Industrial Revolution.
Once upon a time, these seemingly inconsequential pieces of shaped Lakeland timber were fundamental to an industry that led the world.
This is the story of Britain's hidden heritage. Situated on the tranquil shores of Strangford Lough in County Down, Northern Ireland, is a dark and rather dramatic greystone stately home that in its day has played host to prominent artists, writers, politicians and even royalty. Its gardens, which were planted up in the 1920s, are acknowledged as some of the greatest in the world, and yet to many, this place is unknown. So today I'm going to be finding out why this stately home has remained so enigmatic. Welcome to Mount Stewart. Since the 18th century, Mount Stewart has been the home of the Stewart family, holders of the title, the Marquis of Londonderry. The estate itself was first acquired in 1744 by Alexander Stewart, a Presbyterian Scot who made his money in the linen trade. The initial house was just a small part of the splendid building that stands here now. A relatively modest beginning for a family who became legendary for the style and scale of their hospitality and their influence over almost 2 centuries of British and Irish politics. It took quite a while for the house to expand to the grand scale that we see today. Most of the family's money in the early years was spent on forwarding their political ambitions. However, all that was about to change when the third Marquis came along. He married one of the wealthiest women in the country, an heiress to a coal and railway fortune in the northeast of England. So the newlyweds went on a spending spree here at Mount Stewart. They wanted a house to befit their status, and one of the first additions was this enormous portico, big enough to drive a carriage under, something that would impress their guests. The house and gardens are now owned and run by the National Trust, but members of the family do still reside at Mount Stewart, giving the place a real lived-in country house feel. The Trust's policy here is one of conservation, maintaining the house exactly as it was left. A wealthy family home with over 200 years of wear and tear on display. And although it may now be in suspended animation, keeping it that way is a monumental task. It's the staff preparing for the arrival of the public today, place setting the table with all the family silver. Let's go and have a chat to them. Hello. Hi. Hi. You're both National Trust staff here, aren't you?
Yeah.
How many of you are here, based here?
Well, myself and Louise are 2 full-time staff members.
That's all you've got, just 2 full-time staff members?
2 full-time and 2 part-time. They do the morning clean. The conservation team come in and help us care for the collection every morning.
You've got all the family silver in your hands there. So does this come in and out every night?
It does.
For security reasons, obviously, it goes back in the
Yes,
safe.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And also for conservation, so it's not left out. It's in specially made bags that we can just help care for the silver.
OK, carry on, won't you? Let me stop you. Well, beautifully placed set, Louise. Is this the family coat of arms engraved on the glass?
It is. It's the Londonderry coat of arms with the L. You've got 2 different sets.
There's 2 there, isn't there? I've just noticed that.
Yeah, different eras. We've got different sets here coming together, but you've also got the double L's that have been embroidered on the napkins. They were Edith, Lady Londonderry's coat of arms, and she had them all embroidered on all of her different sets, so she could mix and match.
Would the guests in their day have eaten off the silver plates, or would there be a plate put on top of it?
As far as I can tell, then looking at the usage on the plates, they would have eaten off of them. All the scratch marks are there from successive generations eating on them. So, yeah, very much a used service.
Mount Stewart makes a strong impact on all those who enter. It's hardly surprising, as the whole point of the house was to impress. So who were the intriguing family who created the place? Gosh, Peter, this is incredible. I love this all.
It's wow, isn't it?
Yeah,
this
it has the wow
double
factor.
height domed ceiling.
Especially with the light flooding in.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Why did the Londonderrys want to get involved in politics in such a big way? They're independently wealthy. They had everything going for them.
Politics was power. And, you know, really the most famous of the Marquises of Londonderry was the second Lord Castlereagh, instrumental in the Act of Union, also heavily involved in the Congress of Vienna.
Sure, so it was all about power, literally.
It was about power and access to power at the highest levels.
Yeah.
King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra stayed here in 1903. The late Queen Mother, as Duchess of York, was here. And of course, people from the arts and the literary world.
Gosh, a whole mixture, really.
Absolutely, yeah.
From cabinet ministers to military commanders, the Londonderry family bought, fought, or married itself into the upper echelons of British society. But always Mount Stewart remained the country retreat. From something very grand to something very subtle. I like this room. Is it a study?
Indeed, yes, it was Lord Londonderry's sitting room when he came to live here from the early 1920s.
Is that him there?
Yes, that's him there, yeah.
Good-looking couple. That's very clever. I've just noticed the shutters in the windows, look. There's faux spines of books stuck onto them.
Yes, those sort of mock bookend shutters, Paul, when they're closed at night, create a sort of fabulous
it looks like a library then, doesn't it,
yeah.
when they're shut? Well, what are these? Guest books?
Visitors' books here. This one actually commemorates the royal visit in 1903 of King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra.
Yeah.
And then in more recent times, From 1968. we've
Prince
got
Philip.
Prince Philip, yeah.
Wow. Mount Stewart has a wonderful feel about it, with many generations of the Londonderry family having lived here, all making the place their own. There's a sort of historical mishmash of furniture and paintings, fabrics and colours, but they all work as a whole, held together by centuries of good taste. Many of the contents are family heirlooms, handed down through the years, but some are national treasures, like this set of 22 unassuming early 19th century chairs, which hold an incredible story that harks back to 1814 and the second Marquis, the famous Lord Castlereagh. He was instrumental in creating a lasting peace in Europe through his contacts. He gathered together the European leaders in what he called the Congress of Vienna. It was the end of the Napoleonic Wars. This peace lasted for almost 100 years, right up to the First World War. So it was an incredible moment in European history. But to get 22 European leaders sitting down talking was absolutely remarkable. And guess what they sat on? These 22 chairs. Each chair was carefully allocated to a delegate and later embroidered to record who sat where. So this one is the Duke of Wellington's. You can see his armorial there. And that one's Lord Castlereagh's. That early Congress system became the precursor to the United Nations. How incredible is that? Later on, I'll be finding out about one member of the Londonderry family who was instrumental in bringing women the vote and somehow found time to create one of the finest gardens in the world. But before that, our reporter Claire Balding has been to the Midlands to find out about the race to save one of the country's greatest ecclesiastical treasures.
Nowadays, Britain's urban skylines are crowded with magnificent architecture, but take yourself back a few hundred years, and the only buildings that towered over the rest were our mighty cathedrals, with their impressive spires soaring skywards and pointing to the heavens. Our medieval cathedrals were not just places of worship, but also tools of instruction, their statues and their stained glass windows telling stories from the Bible that an often illiterate congregation could understand. But the windows in this cathedral tell more than just a biblical story. They tell a tale of a race against time, an historic drama, and a European treasure that only exists because of the dedication of one man.
And the man I'm here to find out about is one of Britain's unsung heritage heroes, a man who saved one of the greatest ecclesiastic artworks in Europe and brought it here to Lichfield Cathedral for all to see. His name was Brooke Boothby, poet, translator of literature and patron of the arts. Boothby had the ambition to restore the cathedral in his beloved Lichfield, which had lost all its glass when it was smashed in the English Civil War.
Brooke Boothby spent much of his adult life in Europe. In the early 1800s, he happened upon the Herkenrode nunnery, which had been dissolved and plundered during the French Revolutionary Wars.
The Cistercian Abbey, 50 miles east of Brussels, had been all but destroyed by Napoleon's troops. However, Boothby discovered that the abbey's stained glass windows, which dated back to the 1520s, were miraculously still intact. They'd been created by artisans at the very top of their trade, and when Boothby saw them, he realised their historical and artistic importance, immediately sending word to the Dean of Lichfield.
And these are the
These are
letters.
some of Brooke Boothby's letters, and this is the one that he first wrote, and you can see wonderfully, "My love for a place which I consider with the affection of a second home induces me to trouble you, my dear sir, one of the many fine churches or monasteries which have been destroyed. One has been fortunately preserved. I have contracted for the purchase of 17 windows of what appears to me the finest painted glass I have almost ever seen, which I should greatly desire to be placed in your beautiful choir.
Gosh. Is there any record of how much it all cost?
Yes. Altogether, the glass and the transportation came to £200, and he was very particular that he expected the cathedral to reimburse him for £200. So it was an interest-free business transaction, but he didn't want to be out of pocket.
Once installed, the beautiful windows drew admirers from far and wide. But were you to arrive at Lichfield to see them today, you'd be sadly disappointed.
Where is your great Herkenrode glass?
Yeah, don't panic, it's not here, but it is coming back. We took it down in 2010 for some absolutely essential restoration work.
So it's all gone? I mean,
all 7 windows dismantled piece by piece and packed away now for the conservation that needed to be done.
Over the centuries, the wind and rain had taken their toll on this world-class treasure. So the Herkenrode glass has once again had to be dismantled, and this time taken to York, where each and every piece is undergoing extensive renovation.
Keith, hi. Finally get to see it. Wow. I don't quite know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting this.
Well, this was work that was done, at the height of the stained glass period.
I wasn't expecting a lot of nudie bodies, but it's very beautiful.
Well, this is very much part of a religious scene. This is from the Last Judgment. And you can see from the expressions on the faces that these are ones looking in hope and sort of joy and probably go up to heaven. And yet these are the ones that are being judged and they're distraught and they'll be going down to hell.
As artwork, does it move you emotionally?
It certainly does, because this is art, as far as stained glass is concerned, at its peak.
When the glass returns to the cathedral, it will for the first time sit behind a protective layer of clear glass, which allows Keith and his team to remove some of the excess lead that had been put in over the years to repair leaks and cracks, but which had been obscuring some of the artwork.
The actual leading is in a sound condition, so we're not re-leading the windows, but we are cleaning them and we're taking the opportunity of actually removing some of the past repairs that were done. And then pieces at the edge were able to remove and take out the leads completely and glue the 2 pieces together. So we're edge bonding, cracked pieces and removing leads wherever possible around the perimeter of each panel.
The restoration of the glass panels began over 2 years ago, and it's estimated it'll take another 3 years before they're ready to be reinstated in Lichfield.
Now, it's not just a case of repairing the lead and cleaning the glass. These are incredibly intricate works of art, and over the centuries, some of the original brushstrokes have been lost. So the artists here are using both their knowledge of the historic methods of the time and their own artistic skills to replace the finer brushstrokes.
Helen Whitaker is the artist who's been entrusted to restore the delicate Renaissance brushstrokes to the former glory that so captivated Brooke Boothby when he first saw them at Herkenrode Abbey.
How do you assess this as a work of art, and how good is it?
I mean, this is absolutely exquisite painting. It's not only free, it's bold, it's confident, and it's just full of life. I mean, I can well imagine that Boothby was quite drawn by this.
You're tracing over lines that are there, but presumably in some cases you're having to invent.
No, I mean, fortunately we can actually see the ghosting lines underneath that give us enough information to actually, trace those lines that were originally there. And what's beautiful is we're actually bringing back what they probably envisaged when they originally did it.
And I don't, this isn't meant to be a disrespectful question, but why did they bother being so intricate with the faces when once it's up in the cathedral, nobody's really going to be able to see them?
As a craftsperson, and I'm sure it was the same then, you love your craft so much that you want to do the best you can for it. So every piece is a jewel and it's treated like one. So I think that, you know, the detail was there, and it didn't actually matter if no one could see it because the quality was there.
In terms of the colour of the paint and also how it's made, are you making it up yourself every time?
Yeah. I mean, what we are using is they used oxides in that day, and we're pretty much recreating the colours with the oxides. Obviously, we're not firing this back painting onto the glass, but the colours we're matching up by various samples, so we're trying to get it as near as we possibly can.
Brooke Boothby was an extraordinary man. The lengths he went to, even in the midst of war, to save the Herkenrode glass that he had discovered and bring it back here to his beloved Lichfield Cathedral. And the exciting thing is that now the glass enters a new chapter, and very soon it will be reinstated here to be enjoyed for centuries to come.
Later on Britain's Hidden Heritage, Charlie Luxton will be visiting a Victorian time capsule that harks back to the Industrial Revolution.
You gonna make it? Yeah, yes, brilliant.
But first, we're back in Northern Ireland, where my tour of Mount Stewart continues. Home to the Marquesses of Londonderry for 250 years, it's a house that is full of history. But there's one person in the family, above all others, whose passion for the house and gardens shines out. And that is Edith Lady Londonderry, the wife of the 7th Marquess. From the 1920s to the 1950s, she transformed the place from what had become a dark Victorian house into a comfortable early 20th century country home. Isn't it nice to enter a room, Maureen, through a secret door?
It is. Children love this door. Yes, Edith loved this room. This was her sitting room, the best light, the south
You can follow it
facing
around
west.
all day long, can't you?
And the gardens are all around you here.
But it's as if she's just gone out and she's going to come back in.
Yes,
anyway.
all her books are here, her desk, her gardening table, all the little mementos, photographs. Yeah, everything that you would associate with your own home, just on a larger scale.
Everything about this room is charming. I would imagine when the shutter goes up and that crystal chandelier shaped like a ship at night time looks like it's floating on the loch.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
That was the idea.
Who's this gentleman here?
This is Charles, Edith's husband, the 7th Marquess.
Okay.
In the 1930s, he was Air Minister in the British government.
Was he?
Yeah. Flying was his passion. He was responsible for the development of the Spitfire, the Hurricane radar.
Well, that's incredible.
Yeah.
The more you find out about the Londonderrys, you realise it's a family steeped in history, don't you?
Oh, it is. They were very powerful and very influential.
Lady Edith is strikingly beautiful.
She was a very attractive and commanding presence in any room. Not only was she a great social hostess, she was a political hostess and was credited with founding the Women's Legion during the First World War.
Yes, I get it.
The end result of which was women in Britain got the vote in 1918, and it was in no small measure due to Edith Lady Londonderry. She was the driving force behind a lot of women's suffrage.
Perhaps Edith Lady Londonderry's finest legacy here at Mount Stewart are the celebrated gardens, ranked amongst the greatest in the world, and as you wander around, you can soon see why. When Edith first saw this place, she found it rather damp and depressing, but she began to realise its potential. She fell in love with it, and during the 1920s, created a horticultural masterpiece. Neil, this is such a beautiful place. You must love your job.
I do, yes. I mean, to work here is such a privilege.
Every day's a joy.
It is.
Did she design all of this herself and plant it up, or did she have professionals in?
Well, she did. She did it all herself, and she had some books for inspiration.
Yeah.
And she really copied a lot of things and adapted a lot of things. And really, you know, the whole garden is her expression, her artistic expression. So, yeah, she did it all herself. Well, this is the Gardens of Italy by Country Life in about 1920. And Edith's just sketched little ideas. This is this exhedral bench that we're sitting on here. Just sketching things out, and basically she'd give that to her guys to build.
On the back of an envelope?
Yeah,
Look
a
at
little
that.
envelope.
Isn't that lovely? Oh, this is nice.
It is, yeah.
This echoes this too.
Yeah, but this is actually the balustrade. If you look at the pots and the balusters. So she's actually taken that as the design for the balusters there.
From the gardens of Florence.
Yeah. So it's stunning to see. And then the garden diaries Edith kept shows her evolution as a gardener, really. But in 1926, she came up with some stunning colour schemes. Look at this.
Oh, this is really nice. And this is all handwritten and hand-colored by hand.
But the actual one that she's most proud of, I think, is this one here, this sort of sunburst. This is the eastern
It's like an
sun.
aerial view of what she's
She
proposing.
did go up onto the roof and
Did she? And look down?
Look down on it. So we're using this colour scheme again, using half the plants that she used and half that I think she'd like had she been alive today.
Yes.
But if this were just a colour scheme, you'd think that was fine, in herbaceous plants and bulbs.
Yeah.
But actually what she was going for and was most proud of was not just herbaceous plants, but also shrubs, standard trees and pyramid-grown trees and standard trees in amongst the herbaceous plants. So it's got a very strong vertical plane. So you just get a sense of how beautiful, and the way she used colour, you know, in a French impressionistic way.
It's incredible, the attention to detail in this garden. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it gets you on every level, as well as the planting and the colour and the beautiful shrubs, which often you wouldn't find anywhere else growing outside in the British Isles.
One of the most notable features of the gardens is the summer house, known as the Temple of the Winds. It has one of the most extraordinary interiors, and later on in the programme, I'll be paying it a visit. But first, our reporter Charlie Luxton has been to Cumbria in search of a small but perfectly formed object that really did have a big impact on the Industrial Revolution.
The majestic site of Windermere, the largest lake in England and one of the centrepieces of the Lake District. People come up here to walk and climb and just soak up this beautiful scenery. Today, the lakes thrive on one thing: tourism. But 150 years ago, priorities here were rather different, and it was only the odd writer and artist who came here to admire the landscape. Whilst William Wordsworth was penning his poetry to the north of Windermere, the hills and valleys round here started to buzz to the sound of a new industry, based totally on these bobbins. Simple wooden reels, but they were central to the Industrial Revolution, and the Lake District made them in their millions. Nowadays, the word bobbins can be a bit of a joke, but in the 19th century, it was anything but. The bobbin is a forgotten giant of Victorian Britain, absolutely vital to industry, nowhere more so than in the cotton spinning factories of Lancashire. These multi-storey mills were the largest in the world, each with thousands of spindles. Each spindle demanded a constant supply of bobbins. And just a few hundred metres from the banks of Lake Windermere is Stott Park, now the only surviving example of a Lakeland bobbin mill that once would have supported the cotton industry. Like the bobbins themselves, Stott Park seems a rather humble and quaint place, and today it blends beautifully into its tranquil woodland location. It is an absolutely incredible place, this, isn't it? I mean, it's like, it almost feels like it's unchanged.
Well, it's unbelievable, really. It was built in 1835. There's an extension through there which was done in 1880, 1890. But after that, it's just run as it is till 1971.
I imagine you need quite a lot of bobbins for the size of the textile industry that we had.
In Oldham alone, there were 20 million bobbins.
On machines?
On machines in Oldham, yes.
And how many bobbins could this place make?
This place could produce up to 250,000 bobbins a week.
Wow. The industry settled here because it was so close to the giant mills of Lancashire. But the lakes also meant Mother Nature could lend a hand. Local woodland provided the key bobbin ingredient: timber, birch, alder and ash. And the fast-flowing water meant power for the machines. Within 50 years of opening though, Stott Park took production to a new level. The water wheel was out, and in its place a newer innovation: steam.
So this engine arrived in 1880 from Yorkshire, where it had already had a previous life pumping water out of a coal mine. It's now running at about half the speed it would have done in its prime, and even then it only produced about 30 horsepower, which is about a third of the average family car. But that was enough energy to drive all the saws and all the machinery all the way through the factory.
Amazingly, that machinery is still here and still working, which gives me the chance of a bobbin making lesson with Stott Park guide Tracing. The lakes once produced 260 shapes and sizes of bobbin, but I'll be concentrating on just one rather modest effort. In the 1880s, the main work took place in the new lathe workshop, and 130 years later, that's exactly where I'll be working today.
I've never seen so many belts before. Look at all the belt drives. It must have been quite dangerous.
It would be, yeah. There were no guards in any of the machines, the walkways, or the belts, so you had to be very careful.
So this wouldn't have been here?
No, there'd be nothing like that there.
So how did you know where to go?
Well, they were very clever about that because of the amount of bobbins that they made. The floor level was about this high, right the way around the workshop to wound shavings. And they used to just dig out channels to get their access through the shavings. And if you always walked in a channel, you never walked into a moving belt.
One of the most ingenious bits of kit is this 1860s semi-automated drill. The drill bits have been removed, but the mechanism is in perfect order.
When the wood's been bored, you just take that board wood off and then replace it with fresh wood to be bored.
I mean, the ingenuity is just extraordinary, isn't it?
It is, very clever.
Automation, though, meant that this machine could be operated by apprentices. Boys aged 8 or 9 were brought in from Lancashire workhouses. At first they would simply strip bark and prepare fresh logs, but by the age of 12 they were operating machines like this. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, a pattern that would continue for years. With a hole now drilled through the block of wood, it's time to create something that looks more like a bobbin.
So that goes on there.
Yeah, you're going to bring the back tool in first, slowly.
When do I stop?
You keep going, do it a bit harder,
Whoa.
that's it. Now bring the front tool forward to cut out the barrel shape. There we go. That's it.
Whoa! So that's it?
That's it, the roughed out bobbin.
This is beginning to look more familiar, but a separate lathe is required to achieve the finished shape.
Hey! And look at that!
One finished
Look at that! We've made a bobbin! Hey! Yeah.
This mill isn't just a museum. There's real history within these walls. Being here is as close as one can ever get to experiencing this lost industry of the lakes.
Today, Stott Park is still dusty and noisy and just dangerous enough to feel exciting. But imagine what it was like in the late 1800s in its heyday. During the Second World War, they diversified production to make the wooden rungs for rope ladders and the handles for shovels. Later on, they would make egg cups and yo-yos and skipping rope handles. And they were still producing bobbins commercially until 1971.
But Stott Park is lucky to retain the expertise of someone who remembers the active days of the industry. David Steely worked at a nearby mill from the age of 15.
I made a bobbin. What do you think of that?
Good. It's good as mine.
Is it? Yeah. And how many of these do you think you've made in your life?
Oh, thousands. I should say millions, actually.
Millions? I mean, how many did you make a day?
Roughly on that one, around about 1,200
A day?
a day.
Was there a real sort of camaraderie amongst the people you work with? I mean, did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah. Oh, you got to enjoy it, otherwise you get bored. You had to enjoy it.
And what was it like as the mills were closing down? Did it really feel like the end of an era for everyone?
Oh, it did. You thought you had a job for life. They always want bobbins. But no.
It was the age of plastic that finally killed off the Lakeland bobbin industry. And of the 60 odd mills that once existed, this is the only one left intact. Stock Park may now only produce the odd souvenir bobbins for people like me, but I love the thought that this tranquil corner of the world was once a powerhouse of production. And while industries rise and fall, it shouldn't stop us remembering that once upon a time, these seemingly inconsequential pieces of shaped Lakeland timber were fundamental to an industry that led the world.
Back in Northern Ireland, and my behind-the-scenes tour of Mount Stewart continues. What makes this place so special is that it doesn't feel like a museum. It really feels like you're walking around someone's home, just like one of the many house guests who were entertained here over the years. Well, it's a real treat to explore the house. I like being nosy. It gives me lots of inspiration. Now, the whole house, in fact, is full of the most wonderful fine art and antiques. Everybody in the family throughout their history had an exceptional eye and very good taste. A lot of the furniture here was brought from their London residence. One of them was this bed. And it's got that sort of shabby chic look to it, a real sense of sort of faded elegance and a continental feel with this overhanging canopy with the family coat of arms up there. I like the fact that it's bruised and it's chipped and the gilding's flaking off. It gives it, like the rest of the house, a real sense of theatre. But of course, sometimes the line between well-worn and worn out is a fine one. And like any historic home, Mount Stewart has suffered over the years from age. Recently, when cracks started appearing upstairs, an investigation found that a main supporting beam had started to give way, leaving the house requiring extensive work. And that, in any listed building, brings up the ongoing debate: restoration versus conservation. Bring a house back to how it looked when it was new, or leave it exactly as it was found in all its faded glory. Well, Joe, you must see firsthand the problems, the structural problems here at the house, because you're the surveyor for the National Trust.
Yep. I have, over the past few years, I've actually seen the conditions getting gradually worse and worse. And it came to a point there basically last year where we felt something drastically had to be done.
And I guess this is where it gets difficult, because it's sort of conservation against sort of restoration, really. There's only so much you can do, isn't there?
There's only so much you can do, because we're a conservation charity.
Yeah.
So our primary aim is to conserve what we have.
Yes.
But at the same time, we can also take the chance while we're doing the conservation work to do some restoration work as well.
But it's not just the structure of the building that is suffering from the elements. The contents of all the rooms also require monitoring, as they too are starting to feel their age. Now, there's one thing in common that all of our historic houses suffer from, that's wear and tear, and of course, light damage. Now, here's a wonderful example of what sunlight can do to an object, especially right here underneath this light scoop of the lantern up there. Look at the colour of it. You can see it's particularly quite faded, but if I turn it around, like that, look, there you are. Look at that vibrant hue of blue. Isn't that gorgeous? That's exactly how it would have been in 1750 when this chair was made. So you can see there are two choices, really. Restoration, complete reupholstery, or conservation. And in this case, it's got to be conservation. It's now being carefully monitored, so it won't get any worse. But looking at this, you know, it just is such a loved chair. It has been used. There's wear and tear on it. You see here, look, where it's starting to sort of pull apart there. That's somebody's neck and that's somebody's shoulders there rubbing against it. It just gives us a picture of the social history of how it was used. It's had family ownership and it's been well loved. When the same family live in the same house for many generations, furniture and belongings things inevitably begin to accumulate over the years. Mount Stewart, with its many rooms, has become a treasure trove of unopened boxes and unseen artefacts. The cataloguing of the contents is an ongoing process, and almost every week brings a new and exciting find. So with only half of the house open to the public, it leaves a lot of rooms to discover lots more treasure in.
Absolutely, it's quite exciting. Lots of costume, lots of other bits we're uncovering. Very exciting time to be able to get it on show.
And you're finding this on a daily basis, are you?
Reasonably, yes.
Okay, can we have a look inside here? What have we got? Da-da! Wow, look at that! Whose was that?
This is Frederick IV, Marquis of Londonderry. He was a Knight of the Order of St Patrick, and this is his robes. As you can see, you've got the sash of the order.
When does this date back to?
1856.
Gosh, it looks like it was made yesterday, doesn't it? Look
fabulous,
quality
isn't it?
of the needlework there. Can I touch this?
Please do.
It's a wool, isn't it? It's a brushed wool.
It's brushed wool, and this feels the metallic thread here, all the detail. Again, details on the shamrock and the crown being part of the chivalric order.
Oh, look at the lining. Yeah, that's
very
really
rich.
nice, isn't it?
Padded.
But it's the richness of the red that's as bright today as it was
jolly
150
scarlet.
years ago. Yes, yeah. Of course, once each new find is uncovered, the challenge for Mount Stewart's custodians is, like with the rest of the house, to keep it in its current condition for future generations to enjoy. For the final part of my tour at Mount Stewart in Northern Ireland, I've saved one of the highlights, a place that is not usually open to the public. Standing to the east of the house, with fine views across the loch, is the Temple of the Winds. It was conceived by the first Marquis as a centrepiece for garden parties and outdoor entertainment. It is, in short, a summer house on a classical scale. Well, it looks like I'm standing at the entrance of a very grand country house with fine architectural detail, fluted columns and Corinthian capitals. And if you think the outside is exquisite, wait until you see the inside. Oh, wow. Gosh, what a summer house. What a party place. Could you imagine dancing and drinking and partying underneath that flickering light? My word, look at the ceiling. Look at the intricate detail in the plasterwork. That's by William Fitzgerald, a local craftsman, a man at the top of his genre. What a floor. I don't think I've seen anything as good as that in my life on a floor. Again, by local tradesmen, John Ferguson. Mixed variety of woods here. Mahoganies, walnuts, and the lighter detail, this blonde wood, well, that's a holly. So you've got wonderful variegated hues and great depths of colour and beautiful, rich patination all over this floor. This is spectacular, and it really has stood the test of time as well. God, what a privilege to come here and see this. Well, the Temple of the Winds isn't the only tower on the estate. In fact, it's small fry compared to its bigger brother, which is all the way over there. Look at that. Can you see it? Just sticking up on the highest point of land. And it gives you an idea of just how large their estate was, because that was built on their land, look. It's massive. Scrabo Tower was built in 1857 as a memorial to Charles Stewart, the third Marquis. He was one of the Duke of Wellington's generals in the Napoleonic Wars and the great-grandfather of Winston Churchill. Interestingly, the tower was built by subscription from local tenants. It tells much about the regard in which the Londonderry family were once held, but also how, as the 20th century arrived, their aristocratic world was destined to change. Well, it certainly is an impressive view from up here. I can understand why the tower was positioned here so you can see it across the loch when you're looking out the windows at Mount Stewart. I mean, it's the highest point, isn't it?
Yes.
And it is impressive once you're this close. Why was it built?
Well, it was built as a mark of gratitude to the Londonderry family for their role as landlords in the famine, the Great Potato Famine. And it would have been those tenants who during the famine would have been very dependent on the goodwill of the landlord to see them through very difficult times, obviously.
Well, we're nearly there, aren't we? Yes. Do you know, it's built like a fortified building. Meant to last.
Yes.
A monument forever.
Yes, and it looks like it'll be here for a while.
Look at that view.
So you can see all the land that the family would have owned.
Were they popular further afield, or was it more about political divide?
Well, yes, in many ways the history of the family has always been about political divisions. The 7th Marquess of Londonderry, as Minister for Education in the Northern Ireland government, was very much responsible for implementing an Education Act, which in some ways was very forward-thinking and sought to introduce non-denominational education here. But this was really weakened very much by opposition, both from the Catholic Church and from Protestant church leaders as well. So never really materialised in the way he hoped it would.
Were the Londonderry family seen as outsiders?
I think in some ways by this time they actually were. I think the class to which they belonged, the landed elite as it were, was by this stage starting to become seen much more as outsiders. They didn't quite get the political divisions that existed here.
So, did this place do its job? Are they remembered and remembered fondly?
They are certainly remembered. Most people in Northern Ireland would be familiar with the name. I don't think most people would really associate this tower with the Londonderry family, and certainly when a lot of people look at this they know it as a landmark, but in terms of remembering the famine, remembering them as landowners in this area, I think that's very much a part of history and not very much something that people are conscious of today.
Inevitably, as the 20th century progressed, the Londonderrys became increasingly detached from the political system. The cost of running their many stately homes and the burden of death duties meant that bit by bit the estates and their contents were sold off, including their beloved country retreat here in County Down. For nearly 2 centuries, the Londonderry family were at the very heart of political and social life here in Northern Ireland and Britain. The family may now have lost its influence, but Mount Stewart, with its remarkable country house collection and magnificent gardens, stands as a lasting testament to this remarkable dynasty. The British Isles are a treasure trove of incredible buildings, amazing objects and, of course, extraordinary characters who've all helped to make up our rich history. We've been travelling the length and the breadth of the country, visiting some of our much-loved country houses, finding out more about our industrial heritage and unearthing stories from the past as we go. And today I'm in Gloucestershire at a medieval castle, where a trawl through the archives has recently unearthed a lost musical masterpiece. This is incredible, real history in the making here.
And it looks so boring from the outside.
Also on today's show, Claire Balding will be in the southeast of England, finding out how we know how country houses were decorated in days gone by.
It is exactly the same, everything put in the same position, it's incredible.
And Charlie Luxton will be paying a behind-the-scenes visit to an architectural icon of the 1960s.
I am now 180 metres above the whole of central London.
These are the stories of Britain's hidden heritage. Being a feudal baron during the Middle Ages could be a risky business. Upset the king and you just might lose your title or your land, or if you're really unlucky, you could end up losing your head. Over the centuries, almost all of these medieval lords, barons and baronets have fallen by the wayside. But one particular family steered a very clever path, and for over 850 years, they've just about managed to hang on to everything they own. Now, the Berkeley family, and this is their home. They're still here today. Welcome to Berkeley Castle. This impressive Norman fortress on the western edge of Gloucestershire has dominated the Vale of the River Severn for 9 centuries. Its strategic importance may have faded away many years ago, but its rugged presence still impresses to this day. Built to hold the western defences of the Norman kingdom, the stone keep was begun around 1150 by the first feudal lord of Berkeley, Robert Fitzharding. The castle was a reward from Henry II for assisting him in battle. From the very beginning, the lords of Berkeley wielded great power. They were all military men, warriors who fought in all the major battles throughout the Middle Ages and beyond. And they fought with bravery at Bannockburn, Crécy, Poitiers, Culloden, and the list goes on. They were also great statesmen, successful farmers and shrewd businessmen, always eager to lend money and military might to a succession of kings. The story of the Berkeley family is incredible. How did they manage to hang on to the castle?
Basically by staying on the right side of whichever monarch happened to be on the throne at the time.
And it was as simple as that, who you rub shoulders with?
Absolutely. The Berkeley family were quite astute political movers, and they managed to keep in with the right crowd.
Has much been done to the castle over the years? I mean, condition-wise, it was absolutely fabulous.
Surprisingly little. Most of the family were very satisfied with the castle the way they discovered it, but in the 20th century, the last Earl did make a number of substantial alterations.
And that's when obviously electricity went in and mod cons?
Absolutely.
The Berkeley family had been living here for 27 generations. Nowadays, in order to help pay for the upkeep of the place, parts of the castle are open to the public, and one of the most impressive attractions has to be the medieval Great Hall. Now, this is a very impressive room. Is this the original Great Hall?
Probably not. There would have undoubtedly been a wooden one here first, but this is the most recent, and this was finished in the mid-14th century, about 1355, when the ceiling was put on with these wonderful carved oak timbers, probably all cut on the Berkeley estate. And behind you is one of the most important and unique features of Berkeley. This archway over the door is a Berkeley arch.
Do you know, I've never seen that before. I was expecting a Gothic arch like the one we've just walked through. That's slightly more arabesque, isn't it?
It's really unusual.
Yeah.
You only find this in 2 places. You find it here, and you find it in the Bishop's Palace at St David's in Wales.
And there's a whole series of them which run along there.
They frame all the windows.
Are the stained glass windows a lot later, obviously?
Yes, they were part of the improvements put in by the last Earl in the 1920s, 1930s, but nonetheless very relevant to the castle, because there are various shields of members of the family of monarchs such as Henry VIII, shield of King John, who laid siege to the castle and captured it and took it away from the family for a brief period, so very relevant to the castle's history.
Presumably this room would have witnessed so much throughout the centuries.
Absolutely, and one of the most important episodes that happened in this great hall was that the barons from this part of the west of England met here before joining the other barons to force King John to sign Magna Carta. So you could actually say that part of the history of England was written in this very room.
From the early Middle Ages through to the Tudors and beyond, the Berkeley lords were never far from the throne, and scattered around the castle are mementos from many significant events that forged Britain's past. The whole place just oozes history, it really does. It's exceptional. I mean, just look at the wall coverings here. Look at this finely woven cloth with this wonderful gold decoration throughout. Reputedly, from the Field of Cloth of Gold, where Henry VIII met Francis I of France in 1520, just outside of Calais, to cement a real friendship after the peace treaty was signed. Now, both these men were very arrogant and show-offs, and it really was an opulent display of wealth. These were tent hangings, and the Berkeleys were there. And the Berkeley presence at important historical events doesn't just stop with Britain's military heritage. They were also great patrons of the arts. It's said Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream was premiered at a Berkeley family wedding. And there's one room in the castle which shows they were not frightened to confront religious doctrine. Now this is the room I want to show you. It's called the morning room, and like all the other rooms here in the castle, it has a fascinating story to tell. It was previously the castle's chapel, and you can tell that by just looking at the design and the decoration of the ceiling. This dates back to the early 1300s, but if you look closely, there's something very special up there. Up there, written all the way along there, are verses of the Bible. Now you're probably thinking, what's so special about that? Well, if you look closely, you can see they're all written in French, which had been the spoken language of the Berkeleys at the time. It marks the beginnings of the Bible being translated into a spoken common language, which, at this particular time in history, would have been strictly forbidden by the Pope. So this is one of the very earliest attempts of doing that. And it was translated by a Cornishman, John Trevisa, who was born in 1342. And he ended up being the castle chaplain here. All of this predates the Protestant church by a good 200 years. So no wonder it's been painted over and hidden and then scraped back to be revealed. What you see here and in the rest of the castle are significant points in British history. Very powerful stuff. So significant a historic site is Berkeley that for the last 6 years it's been the location of an important archaeological dig. And later I'll be joining in to see what finds have been unearthed. But before that, our reporter Claire Balding is in London to check out an incredible archive that has helped to save some of our most beautiful historic houses.
When English Heritage set about restoring the interiors of Eltham Palace in South London, taking them back to their 1930s heyday, where did the research begin? Family archive? Old paintings, perhaps? No. The Heritage Detective's first port of call is not where you might think.
Well, I have to say, this is pretty blissful. Lovely spring day, cup of tea, and a copy of Country Life. Published once a week, every week since Queen Victoria was on the throne. This magazine has been relentlessly documenting British architecture, interiors and gardens, and its photographic archive has become a national treasure.
Long before many of our fine historic houses were open to the public, the photos in Country Life were the only way to see inside the homes of high society. Nowadays, organisations like English Heritage and the National Trust are using these photographic records as an invaluable aid to many restoration projects.
So today, I'm not in the country, quite the opposite in fact. I'm in London on the South Bank at Country Life's headquarters to find out more about this unique archive collection. John, I think of Country Life as a sort of airbrushed view of the world. You know, every garden is perfect, every painting is straight, everyone looks lovely. How can it possibly be a realistic historical document?
Well, it's Britain in its Sunday best, shall we say, there's no doubt about that. It's very much trying to celebrate the architecture and the buildings and show them at their best.
The quality of the photographs in here is just so high. I mean, these are fabulous.
Well, when it was first published in 1897, it was actually called Country Life Illustrated, because the publisher was fascinated by a brand new technology, which was half-tone block printing, which allowed you to reproduce really high-quality photographs in press for the first time.
Do we know anything about the photographers themselves?
Well, not as much as we would like, but we do have a particularly good insight into the life and works of one of them, a man called Alfred Henson, who worked with the magazine from 1916. He would install himself, set up his darkroom, and work his way around the house, reorganising interiors to make them look picture perfect. This is in fact a photograph of Henson at Old Rufford Hall, nailing dust sheets to the windows so that there was an even exposure of the interior. So this man is turning the place on its head in order to photograph. One chatelaine of a house said it was worse than burglars having him along.
But there's one particular Alfred Henson assignment that really shows how important the Country Life Archive has now become. It was a photo shoot that 75 years later proved invaluable in saving perhaps the most outstanding 1930s interior in Britain. To find out more, I'm venturing underground to the Country Life Archive in search of an article about Eltham Palace.
Ah, this is it. I found you. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Claire. Nice to meet you.
God, it's cold in here.
Keeps everything nice and cool, looks after all the copies we've got here. We've got a complete run of Country Life, dating back from 1897, when the magazine was first published. It's an amazing collection, fantastic to work with.
Now I've got a request.
Okay.
Like a really annoying person. I want something quite specific because I know that English Heritage did a lot of work on Eltham Palace, and the research that they did relied on photographs that were in Country Life from an edition in 1937.
Okay, fine. Just wander down here, 1930, 1932, and here we go, 1937.
This is it, is it?
This is it, so let's
now
have a look.
I think the article that I'm after was in May,
right.
May the 29th.
Okay.
Wow. Oh, that's it.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. Can I borrow this book?
Absolutely.
I promise, I promise. Heavy as it is, I will guard it with my life.
When it comes to interior design, Eltham Palace in southeast London is a rare gem, and one that could easily have been lost forever. In 1937, it was hardly surprising that the Country Life photographer Alfred Henson should want to pay a visit. The glistening state-of-the-art mansion had just been completed, courtesy of Stephen and Virginia Courtauld, and it boasted the most extraordinary interiors in the country.
The Courtaulds were fascinating characters, fabulously wealthy thanks to the family textile business, and utterly submerged in the London arts scene. And coming here is like stepping into their world. It's 1937, an era of Hollywood glamour, high society, and the world of Art Deco. Wow, this is absolutely stunning. It's like walking into a film set.
Eltham's entrance hall has been returned to 1937. In fact, to the very moment when Alfred Henson pressed the shutter on his camera. And it's just as well he did, because within 8 years of taking these photos, the Courtaulds had fled their home overlooking war-torn London, and for the next 50 years, this building was taken over by the army. Eltham Palace and its fabulous interiors parted company. But in 1995, English Heritage assumed responsibility, and with the Country Life photographic record to guide them, set about recreating the world of the Courtaulds.
We could actually be on Alfred Henson's shoulder. I mean, it is exactly the same. Everything put in the same position. It's incredible.
We wanted to put it back as people saw it in 1937 in this article. So these photos were absolutely crucial in helping us to do that. What he's managed to do is create this amazingly luxurious ocean liner feel to this room and put it in print.
All over the house it was a similar story. In Virginia Courtauld's bedroom, one photo revealed her choice of armchair fabric. This design was recreated with new chairs upholstered using 1930s techniques. In the dining room, the bird's eye maple veneer table and chairs were recreated by furniture makers in Rugby. And finally, the famous Marion Dawn carpet at the entrance hall, made once again by hand in Donegal, Ireland, and lined up just as it was in 1937.
What we need to be careful of with Country Life photos and with using them as historic documents to recreate, we have to do it with that knowledge that they were staged. So we were also lucky enough to have an inventory of the house from slightly later, from 1939, which lists lots of things in this room that we're sitting in that don't appear in the photograph.
But it's interesting because it actually increases the influence of Henson on the heritage picture we have now, that he is as much a part of this and of how we view it historically as anyone else.
Today's Eltham Palace is like a stage set, still touched by the hand of Alfred Henson. But his meticulous and comprehensive coverage has enabled a dedicated team of conservators to recapture a most unusual heritage treasure. So often, we can only get a taste of what periods in history must have been like. But here, the full Art Deco glory of the 1930s is back.
All too often we think of heritage as being about buildings and objects, but what I've seen today, an almost secret stash of photographs buried in a Thameside basement, holds an intrinsic value of its own, because those photographs are the key, not just to recreating the accuracy of the contents here, but also in bringing to life again the spirit of a place like Eltham Palace.
Later on Britain's Hidden Heritage, Charlie Luxton will be climbing to the top of one of the country's first and favourite modernist buildings.
The whole of central London spread right before you out to the countryside.
But first, my tour of Berkeley Castle continues. When the Normans invaded England in 1066, they quickly spread across the country, taking over Saxon communities and building defensive castles as they went. Berkeley was strategically placed to guard against attacks from the Welsh from across the River Severn, and it's easy to see why the Normans chose this place as a location. Well, here we are on the roof right now, level, as you can see, with the treetops. The general public are not allowed up here, so I'm quite lucky. But we should get the most marvellous bird's eye view of the whole footprint of the castle, and we do. Look at that. A castle keep, an inner bailey and a curtain wall. It's the most marvellous example of Norman fortified architecture. But what a view! You can literally see for miles around here. Over there's the River Severn beyond the Welsh marches, but you can see right across the Vale. Stick a sentry up here on guard duty and he can see anybody approaching for miles, and likewise the castle itself can be seen from miles away, standing as a reminder to any would-be Welsh invader thinking of attacking Norman England. And there is evidence that the castle was originally rendered with a lime render. And it's there, look, it's that creamy render just around the window. So from a distance, this whole castle would have looked brilliant white against this lush vegetation of the landscape, standing out as a beacon, a symbol of power and strength. Little is known of the community that existed here before the Normans took over. However, it's thought this may have been a religious site dating as far back as the Romans. In the grounds of the castle, Bristol University's Archaeological department have been trying to find out exactly what went on here, and they've come up with some quite surprising results.
Paul, nice to meet you. How are you?
That's a big hole.
It is, it is. We've been digging here now for about 6 years on and off, and we've got some amazing archaeology in this trench. And you're here to see the castle, and in fact, just here...
There's a wall there.
There is a wall. In fact, you're looking, believe it or not, at a Norman house. This house is contemporary with the stone construction of the castle. So this is 1150, 12th century.
What were you initially looking for? Why did you start to dig here?
We were interested in the Norman landscape and actually the earlier Saxon landscape. And what I'm trying to work out is what happens when the Normans arrive. And the castle's in a really strange place at Berkeley, right up in the back corner. We think there's a big Anglo-Saxon minster, a big religious site here.
Right.
And the castle's tucked just outside it. You'd normally expect to find it in the middle.
Yeah.
So there's a big ecclesiastical power, and the Normans have to take the only bit of land that's available to them. And so I'm keen to find out really what happens with the Saxon landscape and how the Normans imposed their kind of feudal landscape over the top of it. And we're trying to find out what life was like for people that lived in these plots, what their day-to-day life was like, what the kinds of crafts that they carried out, what sort of pottery they used, and really what it was like to be under, you know, the yoke of Norman lordship.
So far, the dig has come up with plenty of broken pottery to prove there was once a thriving community here. These bits of ceramic have been a key way of dating the site, and medieval pottery expert Jim Newbolt is here to show me how the pots that have been found at Berkeley were made and what they originally looked like. How long has it taken you to make these?
This one here, that took 10 minutes.
And this technique's called pinched, as opposed to thrown, where it's on a wheel. It's just literally pummeled into shape.
Even when we do get the wheel coming in let's say the 7th century, there's no saying that this technique wasn't just speeded up by putting that on the wheel and going back to the pinching. We start by making the actual rim of the pot and then bring the belly and the bottom of the pot out afterwards, depending on what you want the clay to do. So if I take it to that stage, that's my basic
shallow
top part of the vessel that you see there.
Right, I see.
That's then ready to put to one side. That's a bit soft there. This one here, turn over, and then here's where we put the paddle and anvil. Here's my soft leather anvil, and then we take the rib, and that will create that large, rounded cooking pot. I mean, this is the sound that you would have probably heard in those Saxon houses. There we go.
That's looking good.
That's that Norman cooking pot. By the time we get to the 13th and 14th century, you still see this same shape in use because it's a very practical. The rounded bottom means the heat moves around the outside. You can imagine a rolling boil in the hearth. You could fry sausages in the fireplace, and yet now we say, oh, you can't put pots in the fire. Yet the Saxons could.
I'll be returning to the archaeology site at the end of the programme to see if they've uncovered any exciting finds. In the meantime, our industrial heritage reporter Charlie Luxton brings things a little more up to date as he travels to London and a 1960s landmark.
It's not very often in this country that we sing the praises of 60s architecture. Brutalist concrete buildings, so loved by modernist architects and designers like me, yet so loathed by the general public. There was, and still is, an exception, and because of that, it's become an important part of our heritage. The concrete and glass structure has been defining London's skyline for 50 years. Right from the very beginning, it captured the public imagination, and over time, has won over its affection. I am talking about, of course, the BT Tower.
In 1965, the tower opened to great acclaim. It marked a time of profound change when Britain, for the first time in decades, was looking forward to an exciting future.
As the rubble of the Second World War was cleared away, new and taller buildings began to rise. In a few years, the look of London changed entirely, and nothing changed it more than the building that was eventually to dominate the skyline.
Now you could say that the tower isn't really hidden heritage at all, given the fact you can see it from pretty much everywhere in London. But actually, it was closed to the public in the 1980s, so very few people actually get a chance to see it up close.
So today I'm really rather privileged, as I'm going to be allowed to explore the whole structure, including the famous revolving restaurant and even the roof itself. But first of all, I want to find out how 13,000 tons of reinforced concrete is held up. So I'm heading somewhere truly hidden, an area that hasn't seen the light of day since the early 60s.
This incredible space is the base of the tower. It's the foundation. It's an incredible, enormous concrete pyramid that holds it up. Now, the way this foundation works is that the tower sits in the top of the middle of the pyramid there. And this great big construction here is actually just to spread that weight out, to give it a wider base, to make it a bit more stable. But this is not the bottom of the foundation even here. There's another 50 metres of concrete going right down through the London clay. Because of the sensitivity of those microwave transmitters, the tower couldn't rock. Now, normally, a tall building will actually sway quite a lot in the wind, but this one couldn't, so it had to be super stiff.
80 feet up, that stiffness was reinforced by a collar, clasping the core shaft of the building tightly, holding all the tower's vital equipment firmly in place. Technology and communication were the buzzwords of the 60s, and they were the very reason the tower was constructed. It became the country's biggest telephone exchange and microwave transmitter, beaming out communication signals across the UK.
Putting it simply, microwaves carry radio signals of very, very short wavelength. Like light, they travel in straight lines. And like light, they're lost to view or use, as it were, by the curvature of the Earth's surface.
But beyond the technology, the Post Office Tower, as it was first called, was a global symbol of Britain in the throes of modernisation. Built with public money and with viewing platforms open to visitors, in the swinging 60s the tower was an instant hit. The 34th floor restaurant was quite literally revolutionary.
To the restaurant level, and
the man who opened the tower to those first public visitors is with me today, the then Postmaster General Tony Benn.
So was this like one of the hottest tables in town when it was?
Well, it was certainly very popular because it gave you such a fantastic view of London. So you could book a table here
and see the whole of London while you had your main course.
Yes, you could. Yes.
Why do you think this building is held in such affection by so many people? Because it's an intensely modern building, but people really love it.
Well, I have a special feeling for it, having been here when it was opened and so on. But it was seen as a symbol of the age into which we were moving. And then we had the opening with Billy Butlin ran this restaurant, and the Queen came, and it was a great event.
Now, I understand that actually it still turns.
Well, I hope it does. It'd be very nice if it did.
Should we go and see if we can get it working?
Yes. Who knows where the button is?
I don't know.
Last time
With the restaurant and the tower long since closed to the public, something of an urban myth seems to have developed that the 34th floor no longer rotates. But as you can see, when VIPs ask nicely, it clearly does. Furthermore, the engineering is unchanged since the 1960s.
Well, I've always thought what a wonderful place to have a state banquet. So you'd have the Queen or the Prime Minister here, and the guests would go by.
So when you have that awkward silence, you just sort of drift gracefully off.
Yes, you drift off, that's right, and then come back again, and you would have forgotten what it was about.
Whilst state dinners never quite made it here, the 34th floor was certainly an exclusive spot. The capital's first high-level vantage point. But it's not quite the best view of all. Today, I'm being allowed to venture even higher. Right, I am now 180 metres above the streets of London, and I've got a 360-degree view. It's stunning. There's Wembley over there, you can just see the arch, and then just the whole of central London spread right before you out to the countryside, to the Olympic Park. Absolutely fantastic. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, the tower was the tallest building in London. Incredibly, it stole the title from a building that had held it for 250 years, St Paul's Cathedral. In the past, we built tall to reach towards heaven. But the construction of this tower changed all of that. It wasn't built to point towards God, it was built to point towards the telephones and TV sets. But technology has come a long way since 1965, and Londoners may have noticed that the famous horns and dishes that the tower was built to support have recently disappeared. Getting a closer look involves a very scary step off the side of the tower.
Hope you like heights, Charlie.
In 2011, Bob Simon was part of the team responsible for dismantling an era of communication technology. There's nothing on the outside here that's sort of transmitting and receiving information.
As in the core stuff, which used to carry all the radio and the TV, nothing like that at all on the building whatsoever.
How big were the horns?
The horns were approximately 9 metres in height.
So you lifted them from up there and dropped them down onto one of these decks?
Correct.
And then just cut them up?
Yep. Yeah.
And then how did you get them down from there?
Well, we had to cut them up into small enough pieces to get them into the lift.
So you cut those, because they were massive?
Huge. You can imagine the size of pieces that we had to cut them up into to get them down.
The BT Tower is still very much in use, but the important stuff no longer happens up there at the top on display. It happens down here at the base. This is the International Media Centre, and the vast majority of mainstream TV is managed through here. In fact, you're probably watching me on technology controlled just there. But that information is no longer sent through the air. It goes underground on fibre optic cables, and those cables go under the Channel, to the continent, under the Atlantic, to America and beyond. So this building is connected, hardwired into a massive spider's web that circumnavigates the globe. So here we have a very rare thing indeed. A working 60s building made of concrete, but one that undoubtedly holds our affections. But there's much more to the BT Tower than just a gleaming modernist structure born in the optimism of the 1960s. It stands, I think, as a triumph of its function, communication. Now, the technology might have moved on, but its place in our heritage is assured because it stands as the original hub of modern Britain.
But first we're back at Berkeley where my tour continues. Now one could hardly come to this castle without acknowledging one of the most notorious and darkest tales in Britain's history, which supposedly took place here in 1327. But is it true, or is it just a story? Now, Winston Churchill is supposed to have said history is written by the victors. And if there's one episode that proves this true, it's the event that overshadows all the other incredible history here at Berkeley. And that's the imprisonment and the brutal murder of King Edward II. Now, according to history, Edward II was considered an incompetent king. He was lavish with his money. He put too much trust in his advisors. And in battle, he was a complete failure. He was hated by the people, hated by the barons, but even more so hated by his wife Isabella, who, with her lover Roger Mortimer, raised an army against him, had him deposed and flung into prison here. Now, as we've mentioned, the Berkeley family have pretty much owned and lived in the castle for 9 centuries, which gives this magnificent building an almost unique and unrivaled continuity. And it just doesn't pertain to the fabric of the building, but also its contents. Everything here has been passionately collected by each generation over the centuries. And as you walk from room to room, you'll notice a series of family portraits, and they're all of exceptional quality. If you look at the signatures, they read like a veritable who's who of every great British portrait painter worth his salt. Now, there are 3 marvellous family portraits in here. John, the 3rd Lord Berkeley of Stratton here, and his wife, Lady Jane. They make a rather handsome couple, and they were painted sort of circa 1670 by Sir Peter Lely, who followed in the footsteps of Van Dyck. Lely was a Dutchman. He settled in London as a young man and later on in life became a naturalised Englishman. But his talents earned him the right to be court painter to Charles I. His skills got him through that unfortunate incident of Charles losing his head. He ended up painting for Charles II, became a court painter as well. And in 1680, at the age of 62, he was knighted Sir Peter Lely. But these paintings by Lely are so special because this is the birth of what's known today as the English portrait style. And throughout this period of history, in this particular time, it was the vogue, it was the fashion to have your portrait painted, like we like our photographs taken. And to maximise his earnings, Lely employed a studio full of assistants who would paint in the foreground, the background, and a lot of the body. Lely would come in and just paint the important bits, the face maybe, and the hands, and a little bit of detail. Rather clever. So that's why there's an awful great body of Lely's work around, because he was so prolific. For the Berkeley family to have held their collection of artworks and antiques together and in the same place for such a long time is an extraordinary feat. I met up with Charles Berkeley, who, along with his father, has the mighty task of keeping their ancestral home going. Thank you, Charles. Wonderful textures here in this room, very rich. A lot of people must think you're very privileged to own your own family castle.
I know, and you do get a lot of comments, oh, how lucky you are to have grown up in such a magical, wonderful place. But it does have its...
headaches and hard work.
Yeah, a lot of hard work. We've just rewired and put new heating in the whole of the castle. We've done a whole lot of repair work to the roof and various other places. It is a constant challenge to be able to put money back in.
What was it like growing up here as a kid? I mean, great fun playing hide and seek, I would imagine, and trying on the armour.
It was fantastic. We were up to all kinds of mischief, but it was lovely to be able to enjoy such a place like this. And the visitors always loved it too. They saw these two boys racing around, coming out from behind sofas, and yeah, it was magical.
Where are we going, Charles?
We are going up to the great stateroom, Paul. One of the main bedrooms in the castle, which has got a lot of history and a very fine bed.
Fabulous bedroom.
But the centrepiece is that lovely bed.
Oh, what's its history?
Wonderful carvings. Well, it's fascinating. We believe it's 16th century oak tester bed, and these wonderful carvings, supposedly of Lord and Lady Berkeley at the time.
This is an exquisite bed. Who has slept in this?
We believe Henry VIII stayed here with Anne Boleyn on one of her travels, and Elizabeth I did a pilgrimage and certainly stayed for 2 nights here.
In those days, there would have been about 3 mattresses stuffed with horsehair. It would have come up to about here.
Yes.
But thankfully, you've changed it now.
Yeah, we've got a new mattress put in.
With Berkeley Castle being such an important part of Britain's heritage, what a huge responsibility it must be for Charles and his family to maintain the place for future generations, especially with 850 years' worth of his ancestors watching over him. Earlier on, back at Berkeley Castle, I met the team of archaeologists from Bristol University who were investigating the site's early days. So before we leave, it's time to have a look at some of the treasures they have unearthed.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Good to see you again.
And you. What have you found for me?
Well, this is the key find that I really want to show you, Paul.
This is what this site's all about, is it?
This is what this site's all about. Basically, we're inside an Anglo-Saxon minster, and what we're looking for is evidence that we've got monks and nuns. And one of the things that we know about minsters is that they're literate, and this is a period where most people are illiterate. So, for instance, if the king wants a document drawn up, he'll go to the minster to get that document written.
Sure.
And so we're looking for evidence that we've got monks and nuns, and this is a thing which is absolutely unique, actually, in this country. It's called an astle, and basically, you would have had a long bone pointer from the bottom, and you use it to follow the illuminated manuscript as you read aloud, for instance, in church.
Wonderful.
And when you get to the end of the page, you actually use it to then turn the page. So you
see,
don't
this end would turn the page.
You turn the page.
So you don't touch the vellum.
That's right, absolutely right. And this is a unique find in this country. Wow. So it's 8th to 9th century, and what it tells us is we've got Anglo-Saxon literacy, and you can see it's ecclesiastical. There's no doubt it's an ecclesiastical piece. But that's absolutely the star find from our site so far, and it's a wonderful piece of archaeology.
The archaeological dig outside the castle is not the only place that has been a source of hidden heritage. Locked in the vaults way under Berkeley are the family archives, the home of some rare and remarkable documents. Gosh, what a lot of books. David Smith has been the archivist at the castle for over 30 years, in charge of cataloguing the thousands of documents and artefacts.
So what we've got here is basically the residue of a country gentleman's library in the 18th century with additions, because it's a living library. Things still come in here if they are relevant to the castle, the family, or the archives.
In 2001, David came across a seemingly insignificant book that turned out to be anything but. It was nothing less than a lost manuscript by the great Italian composer Antonio Vivaldi. This was a discovery of worldwide importance. Can you remember the moment you discovered this Vivaldi manuscript?
I can remember the moment when I was told what it was, because...
Was it a eureka moment?
Well, not for me, because I don't understand music. It was someone who I managed to find as a consultant to look at it. This is Professor Michael Talbot of Liverpool. Now, he's a man of few words, and I don't think he would mind even his friends saying that he hasn't got a great deal of expression. So he came in here, I put the book out for him, and he got his head down and he looked at it and he worked on it solidly without saying a word for about 2 hours, and he was measuring the distance between the staves, because that's how you find out which music shop it was copied in and all that sort of thing. And then he looked up at me and he said, go into any antiquarian music shop in Europe, he said, and you'd find a book that on the outside looks like this, but you'd never find one with the contents when you open it that this one has. Gosh. And that was the moment when I realised what we got.
So it wasn't signed Vivaldi anywhere at all?
Well, the word Vivaldi is written on the top of some of his compositions, but what you have here is a compilation of something like 50 tunes, and of those 50, and they're not all by Vivaldi by any means, I think about a dozen are, of those 50, 17 are not known in any other place. They're absolutely unique to this manuscript, and 6 are new Vivaldi music. In other words, it was known that he composed the arias, but the music had not survived, and they do survive in here.
This is incredible, absolutely incredible. This is real history in the making here.
And it looks so boring from the outside.
In his lifetime, Vivaldi wrote over 500 instrumental and choral works, including an opera by the name of The Triumphant Constancy of Love and Hate. And it's from this that the missing arias came, written around 1716. They were lost for nearly 300 years. And just in case you wondered what they sound like, well, we couldn't let this occasion pass without getting in a few musicians to bring this particular bit of hidden heritage to life. That was brilliant. Thank you so much for bringing that piece of music alive. And I know we put you on the spot. You only had about 10 minutes to practice that wonderful singing, Rosie. Beautiful voice. And you're here, that's got the body of a lute. What instrument's that?
It's an instrument called chitarrone or tiorba. It's a 17th century Italian type of lute that was used in Vivaldi's time.
Wow. Well, it certainly sent me back in time, put it that way. That's lovely. Thank you so much. What's it like playing in a room like this?
Well, this music was discovered here, so it's a real privilege to be performing something so rare in such beautiful surroundings. It's really wonderful.
What a glorious way of ending my tour of Berkeley Castle, with the strains of one of the lost Vivaldi arias ringing out in the Great Hall, as they might well have done some 300 years ago. I wonder what other discoveries might be found here in the future. This magnificent castle connects the present Berkeley family with their ancestors. It's their family history, but it's our heritage, because Berkeley Castle, its contents and the events that took place here really have shaped Britain's history. What an incredible place. See you next time.